I'm a contemporary artist and I show in art galleries and museums. I show a number of photographs and films, but I also make television programs, books, and some advertising, all with the same concept. And it's about our fixation with celebrity and celebrity culture and the importance of the image, celebrities born of photography. So I'm going to start with how I started with this concept 7 years ago when Princess Diana died. There was a sort of standstill in Britain the day or the moment of her death, and people decided to mourn her death in a sort of mass way. I was fascinated by this phenomenon. So I wondered, could one erase the image of Diana actually quite crudely and physically? So I got a gun and started to shoot at the image of Diana. But I couldn't erase this from my memory, and certainly it was not being erased from the sort of public psyche. Momentum was being built. The press wrote about her death in rather kind of, I felt, pornographic ways, like which bit of artery left which bit of body and how did she die in the back of the car. And I was intrigued by this sort of mass voyeurism. So I sort of made these rather sort of gory images. I then went on to wondering whether I could actually replace her image. So I got a lookalike of Diana and posed her in the right positions and angles and created something that was in or existed in the public imagination. So people were wondering, was she going to marry Dodi? Was she in love with him? Was she pregnant? Did she want his baby? Was she pregnant when she died? So I created this image of Diana, Dodi, and their imaginary mixed-race child. And this image came out, which caused a huge public sort of outcry at the time. I then went on to sort of make more comments on the media and press imagery. So started making reference to sort of media imagery, made it grainy, shot through doorways and so on and so forth, to titillate the public or the viewer further in terms of trying to make the viewer more aware of their own voyeurism. So this is an image of Diana looking at Camilla kissing her husband, and this was a sequence of images. And this gets shown in sort of art galleries like this as a sequence. And similarly with the Dodi and baby imagery, this is another art gallery installation. I'm particularly interested in how you can't rely on your own perception. So this is Jane Smith and Joe Bloggs, for instance, but you think it's Camilla and the Queen. And I'm fascinated how what you think is real isn't necessarily real. And the camera can lie, and it makes it very, very easy with sort of the mass bombardment of imagery to tell untruths. So I continued to work on this project of how photography seduces us and is more interesting to look at than the actual real subject matter. And at the same time, it removes us from the real subject matter. And this acts as a sort of a titillating thing. So the photograph becomes this sort of teaser and incites desire and voyeurism. Like what you can't have, you want more. So in the photograph, the real subject doesn't exist. So it makes you want that person more. And that is the way I think, celebrity magazines work now, that the more pictures you see of these celebrities, the more you feel you know them, but you don't know them, and you want to know them further. Of course, the Queen goes to her stud often to watch her horses. And then I was sort of making imagery of, in England, there's an expression, you can't imagine the Queen on the loo. So I'm trying to sort of penetrate that. Well, here's the image. All this imagery was creating a lot of fuss, and I was cited as a disgusting artist. But the press were writing about this, giving full pages about how terrible this was. which I found very interesting, that it was going kind of full cycle. I was making comments about the press and about how we know facts and information only by media, because we don't know the real people, very few of us know the real people, that it was going back into the press and they were publicizing effectively my filthy work. So, these are broadsheets, tabloids, debates were being had all about this work. Films were being banned before people had actually had a look at the work. Politicians were getting involved, all sorts of things, great headlines. Then suddenly it started to get on the front pages, like I was being asked and paid to do front covers, which suddenly I was becoming sort of acceptable, which I found, also fascinating, how one moment it's discussing, journalists would lie to me to get a story or a photograph off me, saying my work was wonderful, and the next minute there were terrible headlines about me. But then this changed suddenly. I then started to work for magazines and newspapers. This was, for example, an image that went into Tatler. This was another newspaper image. It was an April Fool, actually. And to this day, some people think it's real. I was sitting next door to someone at dinner the other day and they were saying it was a great image of the Queen outside William Hill. They thought it was real. So I was exploring at the time the hyperbole of icons and Diana and Marilyn and the importance of celebrity in our lives, how they wheedle their way into the collective psyche without us even knowing, and how that should happen. I explored with actually dressing up as the celebrities myself, as me as Diana. I look like the mass murderer Myra Hindley, I think, in this, and me as the Queen. I then continued on to make a whole body of work about Marilyn, the biggest icon of all, and trying to titillate by shooting through doorways and shutters and so on and so forth, and only showing certain angles to create a reality that obviously is completely constructed. This is the lookalike. So the crafting elements of this is completely enormous. She looks nothing like Marilyn, but by the time we've made her up and put wigs and makeup on, she looks exactly like Marilyn, to the extent that her husband couldn't recognize her or recognize this lookalike in these photographs, which I find quite interesting. So all this work was getting shown in art galleries. Then I made a book. I was also making a TV series for the BBC at the time. Stills from the TV series went into this book. But there was a real legal problem because it looks real, but how do you get over that? Because obviously it's making a comment about our culture right now that we can't tell what's real. How do we know when we're looking at something whether it's real or not? So from my point of view, it's important to publish it, but at the same time it does cause a confusion, intentional on my behalf, but problematic for any outlet that I'm working with. So, big disclaimers I have put on everything that I do. And I made sort of narratives about all the sort of European or Brit celebrities and comments about our sort of public figures. What does Tony Blair get up to in private with his fashion guru? And also dealing with the perceptions that are put about bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, the links that were put about pre-Iraq war. And what is going to happen to the monarchy? Because obviously, the British public, I think, would prefer William to Charles on the throne, and it's that wish or that desire that I suppose I'm dealing with in my work. I'm not really interested in the celebrity themselves. I'm interested in the perception of the celebrity. And with some lookalikes, they're so good, you don't know whether they're real or not. I did an advertising campaign for Schweppes, which is Coca-Cola, and so that was very interesting in terms of the legalities. It's highly commercial, but it was a difficulty for me because this is my artwork. Should I do advertising at the time? So I made sure the work was not compromised in any way, and that the integrity of the work remained the same, but the meanings changed in the sense that, you know, with the logo on, you're closing all the lines of interpretation down to selling a product, and that's all you're doing. And you take the logo off, you're opening up the interpretations and making the work inconclusive, opposed to conclusive when you are advertising. This image is quite interesting, actually, because I think we made it 3 years ago, and it's Camilla in her wedding dress, which again nearly got reused now, recently prior to her wedding. Tony Blair and Sherry. And again, the legalities, we had to be very careful. It's obviously a very big commercial company, and so this little, it's not really them, was put up on the side of the imagery. And Margaret Thatcher and visiting Jeffrey Archer in jail. I then was asked by Selfridges to do a series of windows for them. So I built a sauna bath in one of their windows and created little scenes, live scenes with lookalikes inside the window, and the windows are all steamed up. So it's Tony Blair reading and practicing a speech. I've got them doing yoga inside there with Carol Kaplan. Sven making out with Ulrika Johnson, who he's having an affair with at that time. This was a huge success for them because the imagery got shown in the press the day after in every single newspaper, broadsheets and tabloids. It was a bit of a road stopper, which was problematic because the police kept on trying to sort of clear away the crowds. But huge fun. It was great for me to do a performance. Also, people were taking photographs of this, so it's been texted around the world extremely quickly, all this imagery. And the press were, interviewing, and I was signing my book. So, further imagery. I'm making a new book now with Taschen that I'm working on really for a sort of global market. My previous book was only for the UK market. That I suppose could be called kind of like humorous. I suppose I come from a sort of non-humorous background, with serious intent. And then suddenly my work is funny. And I think it doesn't really matter that my work is considered humorous in a way. I think it's a way in for me to deal with the importance of imagery and how we read all our information through imagery. It's an extremely fast way of getting information. It's extremely difficult if it's constructed correctly, and there are techniques of constructing iconic imagery. I mean, this image, for example, is sort of spot on because it's exactly sums up what Elton may be doing in private, and also what might be happening with Saddam Hussein and George Bush reading the Quran upside down. For example, George Bush target practice shooting at bin Laden and Michael Moore, then you change the photograph he's shooting at, and it suddenly becomes rather grim and maybe less accessible. Tony Blair being used as a mounting block, and Rumsfeld and Bush laughing with some Abu Ghraib photos behind, and the seriousness of or the intellect of Bush. And also commenting on the behind-the-scenes, well, as we know now, what goes on in prisons. And that, in fact, George Bush and Tony Blair are having great fun during all of this. And really commenting, based on the perception we have of the celebrities, what Jack Nicholson might be up to in his celebrity life, and the fact that he tried to, he had a bit of road rage and golf club a driver the other day. I mean, it's extremely difficult to find these lookalikes, so I'm constantly going up to people in the street and trying to, ask people to come and be in one of my photographs or films, and sometimes asking the real celebrity, mistaking them for someone who just looks like the real person, which is highly embarrassing. I've also been working with The Guardian, so on a topical basis, a page a week in their newspaper, which has been very interesting working topically. So Jamie Oliver and school dinners, Bush and Blair having difficulty getting alongside Muslim culture, the whole of the hunting issue, and the royal family refusing to stop hunting, and the tsunami issues, and obviously Harry. Blair's views on Gordon Brown, which I find very interesting. Condi and Bush. This image I've decided to show, having a reservation about it. I made a year ago, and just how meanings change, and what a terrible thing that has happened, but the fears lurking around in our minds prior to that. That's why this image was made 1 year ago, and what it means to today. So I'll leave you with these clips to have a look.
Sorry, it's all right. Sorry, doesn't it? Don't worry.
Yeah. Maybe Brazilian?
No, thank you.